Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Digital Supply Chain Podcast. My name is Tom Raftery, and with me on the show today, I have my special guest, Eric. Eric, welcome to the podcast. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hey, Tom. Nice to meet you. Thank you very much for having me on your podcast. And my name is Eric Vasquez. I am the owner and founder of Veterans Logistics Group here in Los Angeles, California.
Fantastic. And just, Eric, I know we've talked about it on the intro before we turned on the recorders, but for people who are watching, who are wondering, what the hell has Tom got in his nose? I had a minor surgery this morning and I have a few stitches in the top of my nose. So I have a plaster over those stitches on my nose. So if anyone is looking on going, what is going on? That's what it is. So no need to be alarmed or anything. Totally fine. Local anesthetic, half hour on the table, up and out, and back sitting in front of the camera again. So
just a little touch up.
Bit of rhinoplasty. My nose is a bit big, so I decided to get it reduced. Kidding.
You see it everywhere here in LA. It's nothing new.
So, Eric, tell us about the logistics group, the Veterans Logistics Group that you founded, right?
Yes, sir. So Veterans Logistics Group actually kind of stemmed from an idea where I already had a previous company, Akio Ads, and we were certified service-disabled veteran, minority, and LGBT owned as a small business. And me being in the Air Force, I would sit at our table and, at our meetings and see all the complaints and issues all basically funneling from logistics and the movement of freight and aircraft parts. And everyone's always just like, man, somebody could just figure out what's the problem with the movement of our goods. And so I said, I want to start working with the government. And so I reached out to my friend that has experience his whole career in logistics. And I said, I'm going to start a logistics company using these same certifications that I have for my advertising. And let's just build it from there. And then over the course of several years, we've managed to kind of build a business and grow it and start scaling and targeting now getting in with the government. But it's mostly commercial now. But that is the goal, is to start working with the government and help them fix their issues with the movement of freight. That's pretty basic.
Okay. And let's start with, what is it you're doing to help companies with their freight issues? And we'll get onto the government side of things in a minute.
Yeah, well, I obviously listening to your podcast previously, hearing how larger companies come in and try to solve solutions at a macro level when it comes to aggregating big data. Obviously, for us being on the end user side of things, where we're a small business, and so everything I've done has been bootstrapping myself, taking revenue and profit that I'm making, just kind of putting it back in the business to build our own technology, and starting with basically tracking our own freight. So everything that we're using by paying out another third party has been just expensive. Even when you're trying to find a product for a small business, I'm like, how does a small business start and build and scale when your overhead is just so expensive for all of these programs and platforms? I'm like, there's got to be something for a small company that can't afford this tens of thousands of dollars per license per year, or per user. So my whole goal is really to try to focus and build up a business where everything's going to be how we need to use it, and then SaaS it out to mom and pop, one or two truck organizations, or smaller to maybe mid-level, where people are, using the next level up program. So that was my goal, and that's basically what we're doing. So everything we've done over the last few years, it's trial and error and things that we want to see to help our flow grow exponentially with maintaining a small team. And so we started with our tracking, and then it started with a freight booking and bidding system where our drivers register, they have their own application. And now you see some of the big name companies kind of trying to launch into the same thing, because a lot of logistics is antiquated. A lot of these big companies have been doing the same thing for so many years that maybe their foundation is really old code and programming. So we're kind of coming in from the ground up and seeing how we can do the same thing, but on a really affordable basis. The data that normal companies can use without having to cost an arm and a leg.
Nice. And how are you getting the word out to people? Because one of the advantages that the big companies have, I'm ex-SAP, SAP, everyone in supply chain has heard of SAP, but how do you get the word out to people about your organization?
Well, what we're trying to do, when it comes to our whole procurement and sales team, what we're doing is, we utilize our certifications to help at least get us in the door. So everyone knows what's going on. It's 2023. A lot of big companies are trying to see how they can connect with small businesses. And there's all these initiatives left and right saying, we're a big business. We want to work with small. we're going to make a promise and allocate, X amount of funds this year gets set aside for the small business or the minority owned or the LGBT owned or the service disabled veteran or veteran owned. So what we're doing is we basically kind of formulated our pitch to say, hey, like we provide an actual service of whether it be warehousing or exclusive use vehicles or hazmat. We do a lot in the energy sector. And so like by getting our name in front of people, that's helping us basically, get in front of client facing, but basically everything that we're building out, we're trying to actually use that for carrier facing or for, the actual other companies that own their own trucks. So the carriers that we do work with are like, oh, well, who are you using for your tracking or who are you using for your own TMS because we've tried talking to obviously like the SAPs and everybody, and some of our clients that we work with, like they require you use SAP. So it's like, well, we're kind of going through an intermediary where our partner uses it because they can afford it. So we're using them. Otherwise, that would just basically cut right into our profit as a small business, So we're basically getting the word out by word of mouth and then also throughout our pitch and through everything we're talking to with people and just showcasing the big business. Like, well, why do we want to bring you on board as a small company? And we tell them like, well, here's what we're doing. We're trying to also be a minor disruptor, if you will, on our scale. And then, everybody's not really paying attention, I don't think, to the little guys or the beginners. So that's kind of really where I'm focusing. It's a little bit of a harder pitch and you're out there in the field more, I feel. But I think there's just a lot more opportunity because your price point's a lot lower.
Sure. No, I get that. And you mentioned you're getting into the government space. Tell me a bit about that.
Yeah, our goal, our first government client we got into was FEMA. So of course, when everyone starts talking about the government, I'm sitting in the meetings and so I can see, I'm like, there's a lot of issues here with moving of freight. It'll be right off base at like a warehouse, but nobody can get a truck on. So I'm like, there's this massive disconnect and the government is always trying to fix it. And so I'm thinking, well, maybe they overcomplicated a very simple problem. And, kind of hearing it on the inside, I'm like, well, how can you basically go up the channel and to find out where is the bottleneck? Like, where is there the issue that's causing this? Like, obviously it's the government. There's going to be red tape. So I'm trying to basically use what we do and the services we provide through the actual moving of freight and getting access to base to see like, how can we fill that gap? It's a constant problem that, my supervisors, I've been in for 24 years and they've had the same problem for years and it's always a problem. And I'm just like, well, the first people to come in and fix this or address this, it's going to be pretty smooth sailing. So I'm just trying to see if I can get a piece in there. And FEMA was our first client. And then, of course, we started working with the Department of the Army and then working with the Department of the Air Force and Coast Guard through some of their load boards and, trying to kind of work past the load board into the more direct or RFP-based projects.
All right. As a startup, it must be challenging to get in and be a supplier to someone like the government or the military. There must be all kinds of red tape and regulations you have to go through. How do you manage to get time for that? Surely it would be easier to chase people that didn't have such onerous requirements.
It is difficult. It is difficult. We deal with that daily. And I think that, I have my team that's kind of allocated to really focus on commercial freight. And obviously the revenue that's generated from the commercial business really helps us kind of build our solid foundation to get more people on board and to navigate the government, world. It is difficult. That's one of the driving forces behind it, is because when you do actually get through there, you see a very small pool of vendors that are actually working with them. So I think that kind of coming in as service disabled veteran owned does assist with getting in. But once you're there, you have to be able to provide the service the exact same. And then, some companies have teams of people that know government paperwork for years. We're kind of learning it. Obviously, you stumble through it because the mistakes could be a little bit bigger. So you have to be very, due diligent to make sure you're actually paying attention to all the fine verbiage. But I think what we're doing is trying to get into the government because as a small business, what they're doing as well is the government is enabling different bases and locations to have like their own ability to procure locally. So we're trying to see how we can do that, like here in Southern California at the bases, and then up in like Travis Air Force Base and JBLM up in McCord or Seattle, Washington. So I think by them allowing them to take control in their own respective areas of operation, it's allowing them to hire local or smaller vendors directly. Otherwise, when they want you to have the EDI capabilities of a large SAP or another platform, a small business is not going to have that at all. So it does make it difficult where they say they want to work with like the local small businesses and all these initiatives and incentives by the government. but then there's this massive disconnect. So I'm just consistently pushing through to try to find like where's the weak link of how we can actually start this business with the government. And it's happening slowly.
Cool. What have been the biggest challenges of getting government contracts, do you think?
I mean, name recognition. You've got massive companies that have been doing this for years. You have the same big brands for the carrier companies. You have the same massive 3PLs that everybody knows. So coming in and trying to fight for a seat at the table and prove yourself and the service that you provide, obviously to scale is not going to be on the same level, but by having a small business and explaining that you have the 24/7, 365 tracking and all the same kind of key fundamentals, you just have to basically just continue doing your pitch saying, give us a chance. Let us try to break into this business. And there has to be room for growth for small businesses. Otherwise, it's the same 3 or 4 companies. And I think you do notice a huge shift right now over the last probably 1 to 2, 3 years maybe, where a lot of incentives are coming from big companies also and their boards to work with small businesses. So I think that all of that's helping right now in the media and just everywhere about working with, less fortunate, or I don't want to say less fortunate, harder to come by or disadvantaged business enterprises in smaller towns or something where it's like, hey, I have a business I'm trying to make work. I think they are doing a good job at that. It's just a slow growth. Yeah.
Sure. To your point, though, once you do get in that door, does that mean then that it's easier to stay there as a supplier and that, I don't want to say it's easy money after that, but, does it mean that it's the kind of business that will become repeat business more easily?
I would say that as long as you're not complacent, you think that just because you got in, you've got the business, because there are a million other me's, small businesses clamoring to try to get a seat. And when you do get your chance in front of somebody to finally, give your own pitch and then provide the service, that's just you getting in the door and getting a trial. You still have to provide that service. You still have to, depending on the company, to work with the larger companies. Like we recently went on board with one of the larger airlines directly on a multi-year contract. And in order to even do that, we had to make sure that we had everything in line with exactly their expectations, because you might be able to get introduced to the RFP. They might entertain you on a second and third round. But then when you actually get some business and they're saying, okay, we're going to give you a chance, if you kind of, drop the ball at that point and you don't have the data to provide, you don't have the service that you say you can, then you're going to lose your shot. And then when it comes to those large companies, the word will get out about your business sooner or later, because I've had enough experiences already in the last several years where the people that I was speaking with on the procurement side are all of a sudden at another company, and either reaching out to you because you did a good job before, or when you reach out to them, they're like, oh, hey, I remember you. So that could go one of both ways. So you've got to step up and do your work too. So, but hopefully the goal is to keep the client,
Yeah, I gotta think with all that work for those, that airline that you mentioned and those government contracts, customer acquisition costs must be enormous.
I don't know. I don't really have like a dollar amount to put on that, but I can say you're referring to basically the amount of effort that it takes for us to get new clients, correct? Yeah. So
correct.
It just takes time. One of the airlines, as I say, it took us 3 years. The first RFP, they included us because of our certifications and everything they said that you guys can do. And then, of course, they start looking at your financials and your background. And, oh, you can't connect to EDI. Oh, you don't use this system. We're going to go ahead and take a pass on you. And then fast forward 3 years later, the next RFP came out and we started talking like, okay, well, what did we drop the ball the first time? Like, how come we didn't get picked the first time? So we had to make sure we get EDI compliant, Plus, of course, as you're growing, you just have to, especially for all the exchange of data. So we did that. And then we started checking all the other boxes that they're looking for. And then, of course, able to win it. So it does take time. So it's not so much more than like the cost. It's the cost of time, really. So you can't get discouraged when 20 companies in a row say no. And then later on when you follow up, they're like, oh, actually, thanks for following up. Here is an RFP. We'll go ahead and include you on. So
nice. And do you see, you mentioned that boards are now starting to put pressure on companies to, be more diverse in sourcing suppliers. Is that, I mean, I've heard that from the other side. I've heard people say, you know, we are looking for more diverse supply base. So this is actually something that you're seeing, yeah?
Oh, yeah, I'm really seeing a big difference. I think that's really what's helped our business out. Like I said, you know, coming from nothing to, you know, being able to provide a service, how do you get that in front of these, you know, even mid-level companies or the Fortune 500s? You know, they include us in, you know, a lot of different RFPs and programs and multi-month training programs. I mean, Target was like a several month diversity training course to kind of get on board with them. And they kind of showcase, you know, how they operate, how they expect their suppliers to operate. And I think it's a great program because if you're a small business and you know how to work on a local level, or even if it is a national level, you don't know how that client specifically likes it. You know what I mean? So I think they do a great job, some of the companies we've worked with, at trying to groom and help show you how to do business. But also, we've been able to come in, like I said, for the airline, and point out a bunch of flaws in the system, saying, well, you know, this system is kind of not working right. And you know, other companies, the larger they are, they do understand that they have internal issues of their own because sometimes the tech is antiquated. Like I said earlier, you know, they may have their programs that they've used for years and they're going through a transition themselves. So, I mean, you know, even if you're a large company, you would feel that the larger the company, like they've got everything dialed in. And there are several companies out there that they don't use this big data. They don't use multiple platforms. So we do see a lot of issues there as well.
Okay. For other smaller businesses like yourself who are in the space, what advice would you give them so that they can also grow their businesses?
Well, I think it really depends on what the small business's goal is. Like, you know, my goal is for us to build a consistent business where we can come to the market and, you know, be a known name. I want to actually have our recognition for our business, you know, that we're a serious player and we mean, you know, long term. But also, I think that small businesses need to figure out, because it was the hardest thing for us, and it still is. It's just like your cash flow and how you can reinvest in your business to grow. Like everybody knows, like, okay, well, where can we automate? Well, automation costs money. Developers cost money. You know, even when you're researching developers to use, just the time and effort that it takes to find a team that you vibe with, that you mesh well with, you know, they take direction well and give feedback. Just development costs in general are expensive. So
Yeah.
personally, I think the small businesses that want to really make it, you know, figure out how to keep your operational costs low. So that's why we went in to try to automate as much as we could. And, you know, listening to your show, I hear some of these big companies that are out there. I was like, well, that's a great goal to get to, where you're automating on that level for certain processes. And then where can you not do it and just pay them for their service for that little, you know, niche piece for what you're trying to do. But then, you know, everybody's trying to make their own data proprietary, or how they're pulling it or where they're pulling it. But that's what we're trying to do as a small business. We're trying to see how can we reinvest in ourselves on a manageable level to build out more features and processes that will help us scale with a small team. And I think a lot of businesses are probably trying to do that. My goal was not to try to find how can we bring on some funding with a good idea and, you know, give away a huge percentage of ownership and control, and then it's just not your business anymore. So that's why we're taking the slower route, but it's, in my opinion, a little bit more meaningful. But
Nice.
it's us.
Nice. Yeah. Yeah. Do you have any success stories you can point to for companies?
I mean, when it comes to success stories, I could see, like, you know, our revenue has doubled year over year for 4 years in a row, kind of with our map of what we're doing, you know. So we went from, you know, kind of nothing into like a multi-million-dollar business, and still categorized as a small business for our next codes of logistics. But I think that the success stories are kind of all over the place. I think like one of them is just still growing and still being in business several years later, you know, through COVID. I think that's a success story in its own. And, you know, trying to navigate the change when it comes to all the price fluctuations and import export costs. Like we would kind of, you know, roll with the tide. And I think that's a success story as it is. And then, like I said, getting on board with our larger clients, like working with some of the larger battery manufacturers and electronics companies, working our way up the chain, I think is another success story. That's from persevering, you know what I mean? Getting told no a lot and just keep on providing your service with a smile. And
that's hard.
And listening to the problems that your clients are having. Like, what are the other vendors doing wrong that's, you know, upsetting you guys? And then just try to maybe use that angle. Like, how can we just address that one thing instead of all 10? So that's kind of where we're at. Yeah.
Nice. And I mean, you're 4 years in now. Where do you see yourself in another 4 years' time?
Well, I always had a goal of like being $100 million company, just because, I'd see other companies that do it. And, some of the interviews that I was on a long time ago trying to get on board, and I was like, oh my God, $100 million company. I'm like, that's awesome. So then as you start building this up and doing this, you're like, this is actually a very manageable number. It is a realistic number. It's just based on scale. And, as long as you've got a solid operational foundation and you can handle the incoming business, then you grow your team, organically when you need them, not ahead of time, not after the fact where you're stumbling and fumbling. But I think that's my goal. That's kind of the goal, and to have a good amount of businesses utilizing our SaaS TMS and tracking and accounting, just the whole flow, because I feel like it's what I'm looking back to. I'm looking forward, but also what would have helped me when I just started, or if I was starting over right now and I'm trying to minimize my out-of-pocket expense, but not get some garbage, technology. And I feel like you pay for what you get, what's out there right now. But if that could be a little bit adjusted where it's software, you know what I mean? Like some of the companies that charge what they charge, I don't understand it, especially when there's so many issues still, or the customer service or the help. So I'm trying to see how I can address that. I think it'll be fine. I think we'll do well.
Cool. We're coming towards the end of the podcast now, Eric. Is there any question I haven't asked that you wish I had, or any aspect of this we haven't touched on that you think it's important for people to be aware of?
Not really. I think when I'm going over the questions that we were going over and just listening to your previous podcast, I think that it's awesome to be able to come on this show and showcase where, I might not be the CEO or CTO of a 1,000 member organization or larger, or, be backed by a VC with 25 million. But on the flip side of being, like I said, the end user that's listening to these shows and trying to see, like, how can we use that data to help us grow, or what can I do to help us grow, but maybe on a more micro level, like, smaller bite-sized chunks of data that we can ingest and actually use to our advantage, like the lowest bar of entry, So that's what I'm trying to figure out. And I think that other small businesses that hear this and are also on here can take that into account, like, don't bite off more than you can chew. And, if you see somebody has a good product, maybe like earmark it for later. And then when you get to the next stage, set up a call and be like, hey, here's where we're at. Do you have any programs to work with small businesses or to help utilize your service? And I don't know, maybe see if they have them there. That would be nice if some of these businesses have like different enterprise levels of what you can kind of utilize their software for, or their data.
Cool. Great. Eric, if people would like to know more about yourself or any of the things we discussed in the podcast today, where would you have me direct them?
Yeah, you could go to Google, and our company is Veterans Logistics Group, and our website's vetslg.com, and you can find out more information about us. And of course, we're all over LinkedIn and Twitter and all the socials.
Cool. I'll put those links in the show notes, Eric, so everyone has access to them. That's been fascinating. Thanks a million for coming on the podcast today.
Thank you so much for having me. This is amazing. Thank you. Sorry if I rambled.